Rebels, we are back in the studio today with Ejieme Eromosele. We are so very excited. Globally, a thought leader in customer success. Probably needs no introduction from someone like me, but I'm going to make a mere attempt at best. I see her everywhere advocating, sharing, leading, growing other people in our community, and just really super thankful that she came to share here on the show today. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, we look at someone and say, you have achieved this massive amount of success. You've chose to use it in a way that helps other people. And I'm just curious, tell us a little bit about your path. I think it's important, the journey, how we all end up
Yeah,
where we end up, right?
absolutely. And it is a journey, right? So I'm still learning, I'm still growing and evolving, and any little bit that I can give back, people have given to me to get me where I am. So it's my way to pay it forward. But yeah, my career started in management consulting. So not in tech and not in customer success, but the thread that I like to say it's kind of like woven through my journey is that focus on customers and customer experience. So very early in my career, that's what I was doing. My first job out of college, working at Accenture. I should like to say my very first role was New York City 311. So Accenture had, concepted this idea to help cities and local and state governments to connect with their citizens in non-emergency situations, right? So that was the big project I was on. So I was in downtown Manhattan working with the call center agents at the time. And that was my introduction into the value that your customers and connecting with, I mean, there we were New York residents and citizens, right? But connecting with those people that ultimately are achieving some value from your product or your service, why that's so essential. And that really struck my path. I spent 10 years in management consulting. Then I went to PwC, but I really got to build the foundation of how to do great customer led growth from even those early days. When I didn't want to do consulting anymore, I pivoted to the New York Times. Obviously, an iconic brand, and I got to lead customer experience for them. Did that for a few years, learned a ton, and I think I really got the bug of the subscription revenue world. And then, yeah, I chose to take my first role, my first true customer success role as VP of Customer Success at a New York City based startup. And yeah, I've been on that journey since then.
It's exciting. Isn't that interesting how that sort of went, that ebb and flow? And I love that you were right in the middle of like Manhattan and all of this. And
Yeah,
that's exciting, a very exciting place to really get thrown in
yeah.
to this world.
It was. It was. And also just a page on like luck, right place, right time. Did I know I wanted to work in customer experience stuff? No, but that project needed a bunch of available resources, and it was the first project I got, right? So I also want to chalk it up a lot to luck, and being at the right place at the right time.
That's awesome. Before we go into kind of the rebel thought, because I always like to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
what rebels mean from the different guests and you sharing that. But I would love to hear, like, what's your favorite food? I know that sounds silly, but I'm a
Oh,
foodie. What do you love to eat?
I love to eat everything. Maybe that's the problem. No, it's a good thing.
I can relate.
It also is just like a social thing that connects us, right? So, the thing I love most, so I just returned from my role in EMEA. I was living in London for the past 2 years. So now I'm back at home in the States, and I'm actually spending some time back in my parents' home. So the dish that my mom makes that I really love, I'm Nigerian, so she makes a lot of, Nigerian food. But it's a Nigerian dish, and it's a spinach-based dish. So it's healthy-ish spinach-based
Hmm.
dish that you can eat with like plantains or rice. It's actually really flexible. So yeah, she makes the best dish, and it's just like my comfort food. So it would have to be that.
Isn't it interesting how the food that brings us the most comfort, even as adults, we look back and it's that connection to home and hearth.
That's right. Absolutely. It's just like automatically it makes me feel at home, literally and also figuratively, for sure.
Yes. Um, we talk a lot about positive rebellion showing up in a way that really drives what we do inside of B2B, in a thoughtful and intentional way. But I'm curious for someone like you, and everything that you've seen and accomplished, what does that mean to you? What do you think that looks like? How do we show up as a positive rebel in SaaS?
Yeah, it's a powerful question because I think SaaS is really getting, or not getting, it is being disrupted, right? Like, the way that we sell to consumers is changing, right?
Mhm.
There's information and knowledge and content everywhere. AI is kind of revolutionizing the way that people consume, but also, get information into other people's hands. So, I do think that like now's the perfect time to be a rebel in SaaS because we are all trying to figure it out and trying to take things that used to work in the past and seeing how we can apply them to working now and in the future. So I am still like going back to the learning and back to the playbooks of saying, okay, there's still some things that are foundational in terms of how we work, but like how do we apply where we are to have greater context and greater outcomes? So I'm actually quite excited for people that are being rebellious, challenging the status quo and kind of challenging the stuff that like we've always done in the past because some of that stuff is no longer working and it's no longer relevant. And I'm excited to be creating the new SaaS of the future.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And I couldn't agree more. It's been very interesting just to see the pace and kind of the impact of AI, and
Hmm.
it also makes me think about robotics and how that's going to sort of play into all of this as well. But I love the excitement that you bring around, the creativity and
Hmm.
whiteboarding, figuring out like what this looks like next. And I think part of that, to your point, and you articulated it so well, it's like we've got to figure out where maybe what worked before doesn't work now, and that's okay. I love that. So, speaking of which, customer success has it looks a little different everywhere.
Yeah.
That those of us that have done this a few times have built success in a certain way.
Hmm.
The way that the discipline has sort of evolved, we are starting to see more of this sort of ebb and flow of revenue, commercial accountability,
Hmm.
and how to do that, right? And the type of people we need to do that and how we enable those people for their best success. I was really hoping, if you will, maybe you'll share some of your advice. What do you think is happening in that realm? Do you also feel and see that as you're navigating the community and your research as a leader? And how do we do that in practice? How do we own the number?
Right.
Everybody says own the number.
Right. Right. It's a great question, and I think a great time to be a CS leader because now we truly can grow and quantify the impact of our work. And I think owning a number is the best way to do that, right?
Mm.
We know that great CS drives business growth, drives business outcome, drives more efficient growth as well. And now it's our time to prove it. I mean, I think I was fortunate. I like to say that I have a lot of professional anxiety and career anxiety where I want to make sure that the work I'm doing is very quantifiable to the top line. So very early in my CS career, I said, you know what? I want to own renewals. And then eventually, I was owning a portion and now all of our expansion revenue. So,
Yeah. So, just again, to really zero in on commercial negotiation and how we own that number, to, loving all the stuff so far, keep digging in there.
yeah. So owning the number, I'm so glad that now CS leaders really have to be accountable for it. It's something that I've always wanted to do in my customer success journey, and I got the opportunity to do that very early on. And I think it really is well aligned to the value that we drive already. Now we can just more quantify it. I also like to think that like owning the number, having commercial responsibility isn't that far from the core elements of customer success anyway, right? Because to really be able to sell and to expand and to grow with our customers, we need to do a few things really well. I think the first is understanding the core business challenge that they're facing. The best sellers don't start by pushing a product, they really start by understanding the problem. And your customers, we know, they buy a solution to solve that problem, whether that problem is trying to grow revenue, trying to reduce costs, trying to be more innovative, whatever that challenge is, that's why they buy the product or the solution. So that's very well aligned to the work that CS teams do day in and day out, realigning on what is that customer challenge. And then of course we align on like how does our solution help solve that challenge. So again, the best sellers don't push products, they push solutions to solve the critical business challenges of their customers. Again, this is what CS is already doing. So I think if we can just like take the lens that like great selling is actually aligned with great customer success, that can maybe help CS leaders and CS teams kind of overcome some of those mental barriers. I think though we need to be honest with ourselves and realistic about like what we can actually take on and the skills gap that is needed to truly be able to close that deal, because sales teams spend tons of time, resources, energy on training their sales teams to be able to deliver. If now we want CS leaders and CS on that number, we should also be investing time in upskilling and reinforcement training on how they should be able to do that, right? I was fortunate that I actually ran new business for 2 years in EMEA. And one of the things that I learned about the sales process is that it is a process and it's sort of like a project management exercise. Like once you have the key components together, I think we like to think of sales as like, oh, it just happens. Like some people are just born with it. Maybe she's born this way. No, it can be trained and taught and developed over time, right? So I think, the last thing I would say is yes, own the number, but make sure you've got the resources to really do a great job at owning the number.
That is really powerful, because I find so often that it's a race to own the number, but
Yeah.
having the plan and the people to do it, as you put it, and ensuring those people have what they need. That's such a key component and something that often gets missed. So I think it's very interesting. I think someone like you who's, owns the new business and seen that process as a process, as you articulated, um, you see that. And I think that's pretty interesting in how you share that we should think about pivoting and sort of moving into that ownership mentality. Because just like when we own anything else as leaders, making sure that our teams have that ability to do it successfully, to tell that top line success story, as you put, that's really, truly powerful. So, I love it. I love it. I'm curious, is there anything along the way that you would caution, right, leaders when they're going to take the leap, so to speak, around owning this? Is it avoiding missteps in collaboration across the
Yeah.
room? If you don't mind, give us a little expert advice there.
Yeah, the one area of caution I would say is, we already talked about like making sure that you've got the right training and enablement, making sure that you've got the right team. Like, is there even bandwidth to sell, right? Like, and we have
Mm,
to like prioritize. Like, you may have to take certain things off of your team's plate so that you have the opportunity to truly realize the expansion and the revenue potential there. I think the last thing I would highlight is that we need to align compensation as well. So if revenue is a goal, incentives need to reflect that. And CS comp, whether it's like the base and the target split, or whether there's additional kind of bonuses or commissions on top of that, really need to be accounted for, right? Like the compensation plan will likely have to look a little bit different as you are taking on commercial responsibility. And that's just because it's incentives driven, right? If let's say CS has to own renewals and expansion, what's more important? Like, do you want more of their time to be spent making sure you're securing that renewal? And do you want additional upside and expansion? How are you designing a compensation plan to make sure that like you're prioritizing the team's activities in the right way?
that's wonderful. And I think that the whole aligning compensation is something that, is definitely unavoidable. And if you're going to own the number, it goes
Yeah.
into that owning the number. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know how, but somehow I think it's because we've been having fun. We've come to the end of our time, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on to the show. And if you will share with us, how do we learn and grow more with you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again. Best way to find me is on LinkedIn. You could just search Ejieme, Ejieme, and I should pop up for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much for coming on to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Rebels, until next time, see you later.